Step through a turf-framed doorway into a room the size of a ship turned upside down. Smoke drifting to a small hole in the roof, ale warming by the fire, snow hissing as it melts off your cloak. Privacy? Not tonight. Welcome to the Viking longhouse, where the walls are thick, the air is thicker,
friend.
and the gossip
Come
is
warm
warm enough to
yourself
thaw
by the
your
fire.
boots. Shake the snow from your shoulders and pull the heavy doorboard into its groove. The wind stays outside.
Like spirits
Everything
from the
else
old tales.
stays in. Heat rolls from a long, low hearth that runs like a glowing spine down the middle of the hall. Above it, smoke lifts and lingers, indecisive, before finding the small roof opening like a lazy star. Dogs thump their tails against bench legs. Someone props an iron pot in the coals. The ale by the edge of the fire steams gently, sweet with malt and the day's smoke. You hang your cloak on a peg that's polished by 1,000 winters and just sharp enough to remind you not to lose it. This is not a house. It's a whole village under a single roof. The Longhouse is the North's everything machine. Farm and fortress, workshop and weaving room, dining hall and bedroom, courtroom and concert venue, all compressed into one smoky rectangle that hums through the dark months. By day, chisels bite timber, looms sing, and churns slap cream into butter. By night, benches become beds, bedboards slide into place, and stories stretch as long as the shadows. Cattle breathe at the byre end, giving off a heat you won't thank them for until the temperature drops. Children drowse under wool. Elders lean close to hear, to teach, to correct the tale. We'll spend a single winter night here, slow and unhurried, finding a place at the bench, tasting the warm ale, listening to the scald test a verse against the rafters. We'll learn why smoke is a neighbor, not a nuisance. Why animals sleep indoors. Why the door bar sits within arm's reach of the axe. We'll hear about Draugr best told after the fire is banked, and how to trick frost with felt, fat, and stubbornness. Cozy? Mostly. Darkly funny? Always. Authentic? As far as the hearthlight reaches. This is History Lullaby. We're here to tuck you in with sagas, not silk sheets. Settle your back against the board, pull the wool to your chin, and let the longhouse breathe around you. The snow can snarl at the door. In here, the night belongs to the fire, the stories, and the slow drift of sleep. The night begins with a squeak, not a mouse snow. That particular high, dry crunch only deep frost can make as your boots bite and lift across the yard. Your breath makes quick, pale scrolls in the air. The wind presses a cold palm against your cheek and tries to push you back to the byre. You lean into it and find the door. A broad plank hung on thick leather hinges, iron ring cold enough to sting. Beyond the threshold, light leaks in a low ribbon under the sill. Smoke curls at the edges like the house itself is exhaling. You rap once for courtesy, twice for warmth. A dog thumps its tail on the other side. One beat, two in a bar shifts with a wooden sigh. You step in, and the world narrows to heat, smell, and sound. The turf and timber scent hits first. Sweet, damp earth from the sod walls. Old pine resin and tar where beams were pitched. A ghost of last summer's hay. Layered over it, tonight's living breath. Wool steaming, leather thawing, salt fish drying on laths, smoke rising to make a gray halo under the rafters. It doesn't go straight up. There's a lazy eddy, a slow river that collects, darkens, and then finds the small smoke opening in the roof, one uncertain breath at a time. Your eyes water while they decide which world they're in. Underfoot, the floor is hard-beaten clay, warmed by months of footfall. Your souls remember it. So do the dogs. Two of them, wolfish, clever-eyed, rise at the door with a low huff, tails describing hopeful circles that slap against bench legs. They sniff at your shins, read your day like a scroll bog mud, a nick from a holly branch, the salt of sweat, and decide you belong inside. One leans his shoulder to your knee as if to push you deeper into the hall's gravity. Behind them, a child's soft laugh catches, and then the longhouse swallows the sound. The layout reveals itself the way your hands learn a loom, by lines and warmth. Down the middle runs the hearth, a bright, low ember spine, about as wide as your stride, banked at the ends and alive in the center. Where a pot hangs from an iron trammel, it ticks and sighs in the fire like a settled animal. fat flecks stuttering at the surface as the stew lifts and falls. Above it, a beam glossed by smoke holds 3 tallow lamps, small clay boats of flame with rush wicks that tremble whenever the door thinks of opening. Their light is soft as breath and about the same color. It gilds the wet along your cloak hem and sets the steam rising from it aglow. The hall's edges are work and memory. Tool racks crown the walls, adzes with handles worn to the hand that knows them, a sea axe in a leather sheath, a pair of axes polished to a crescent shine. A line of shields rings the high section-round faces turned out, boss eyes catching the fire. From a rafter, a net of cords, cradles, bundles of herbs, angelica, thyme, yarrow dry, and whispering if someone passes beneath. Fish hang stiff and pale at the cool in-stock fish that will drink the stew when the days turn mean. There's a rack of damp mittens steaming like small animals. A pair of bedboards lean against the far bench, their ends carved with the simplest of knots, waiting to slide into grooves and turn seat to sleep. At the center, 2 carved posts hold the line of the roof. They are darker than everything else, drunk on centuries of smoke. Look closer, and you see they wear their work. Shallow cuts of beasts, noses, a coil of a serpent's body, the wear of hands that touch when words fail. Children graze them with fingertips on the way past for luck. Elders steady themselves there when they rise to speak. The posts make a kind of invisible gate around the best place to sit, the high seat, where the wall planks show a little less warping and the furs pile deeper. From that seat, the whole house is visible, the fire's long tongue, the door's stubborn shadow, the byre end, where cattle breathe clouds and shift their weight, the far end where loom weights hang in neat ranks like a line of moons. A woman near the hearth glances up and tucks a strand of hair under a wool band. "Cloak," she says, which in this room is a full welcome. You tug at the ties while your fingers remember how knots behave when they've been in snow. The pegboard by the door is honest, brutal wood. A dozen pegs jut from it like teeth. You lift a corner of cloak to test which peg bites least. The peg chooses. Splinters introduce themselves. You decide to be on good terms. "Sit," says a man from the bench-broad hands, beard damp with thaw, a twinkle the lamps have seen before. A space appears as bodies lean and knees slide. Just enough for you and the dog who has decided he's part of your kit. Here, warm your palms. Someone flips the iron ring at the hearth for you with a stick, so you can hang your gloves close without courting flame. Heat climbs your sleeves while cold backs out of your bones one floorboard at a time. This is hospitality boiled down to muscle memory. A horn appears from a hand you didn't clock. Its rim is smooth from mouths that have found it in the half-light since the first frost came down. Warm ale lives inside, smokier than summer, sweet as baked grain. A whisper of spruce at the edge where someone threw twigs into the mash. The horn goes around with as much ceremony as the night has patience for. The householder drinks first, a toast quick and true, for warmth, for walls that hold. The horn travels left, as is right, and each mouth wetting it sets off the tiniest ripples in the room. A cough caught midway softens. A boy shifts off his numb foot. The old dog by the door forgets to pretend he isn't listening. You sit among it and let the longhouse tell you where you are. A loom to your right holds a half-born band in red and undyed wool. A girl's tablet cards rest on a peg beside it, holes dark as seeds. Farther down, a table the size of a man's back supports a whetstone and a half-shaped plank. The curls of shavings at its feet look like snow that learned to behave. Beside the door, the wear of 40 winters makes a ladder of the wall where hands have braced to lift the bar. That bar lies now in its sockets like a log set against a river. It makes a sound when it drops that says both home and we're ready. The wind takes that for a cue and slaps the thatch. The roof answers with a shiver that passes along the beams. You can feel the pressure change where you sit. The smoke wheelchair under the rafters slides, considers the room again, and drifts toward the smoke hole. For the second time, you become aware of just how thin the line is between weather and wall. Out there, a white, indifferent world that would take your breath and keep it. In here, a long, glowing thought that remakes the dark into something with edges. The dogs agree. They patrol the door, then flop near your boots with the sort of committed sigh only creatures that have never written a letter can make. One puts his chin on your foot as if that settles jurisdiction. A cat threads the bench back like a rope walker, tail flagging the corners of its opinion. You learn the bench etiquette by osmosis. Don't sit higher than you're asked. Tuck your knees when the horn is passed. Keep your knife by your belt, but your hand away from it unless you're cutting bread. A little farther in, two older men sit shoulder to shoulder near the high seat, trading the kind of quiet words that move fences more than any axe. The host's wife, she of the steady hands and steady eyes, leans past and puts a shallow bowl into yours. The stew is thick where it wants to be and thin where it must be. Cabbage and onion melting down, barley soft, a plug of pork here and there, a fat eye of butter floating like a winter moon. Steam wreaths your nose. Behind the vegetable, there's a ghost of the sea from the stockfish that gave itself to the pot and didn't ask a fuss made. You dip your spoon and remember how to eat with gloves off. Talk braids itself around the chores, still going. A boy at the door bangs snow from a bundle of birch twigs, hangs them near the hearth to think about their future as kindling. A woman stretches a skin near the back, scraping with careful strokes that sound like someone drawing slow lines with a nail on wood. Someone else turns the pot with a stick and sniffs like a general. The longhouse is always a workshop first. Even resting, you tuck something. Feet under a sleeping hide, shoulders under the end of a woven band, thoughts under a remembered verse. The seating map is a language, and your body is learning its grammar. Closer to the high seat. Kin, allies. Those who can be trusted to watch the door without staring at it. Along the bench curve toward the buyer, neighbors who are almost kin and kin who live a road away. At the very far end, by the low door where the air comes in thin and mean, the boy who said the wrong thing yesterday, the visitor who hasn't yet earned the story of the house, the man whose temper is better when it's cold. No one is unwelcome. Some are simply warmed slower. You have the place of the familiar newcomer 1 foot in, 1 foot to prove, and the dog on your boots is a vote of confidence. Outside, the weather tries on voices. The wind fingers the thatch one way, then the other, hunting for a seam. Sometimes it finds a loose straw and plays it like a reed. Snow pecks at the doorboards with the dry sound of sand. The doorbar answers once thunk, and silence follows. The sort that isn't empty so much as observant. A boy glances up as if checking a signal. The old man near the post doesn't look up at all. In winter, weather is a character with the longest lines, and the longhouse is a stubborn director. Someone near you laughs, low and warm. The horn has made it back to the host, and the first loosened word of the night escapes. A story seed. Not a saga yet that will come when the lamps are trimmed and the bedboard slotted, but the little ones that fit between spoonfuls. Do you remember the thaw when the ice took the bridge? Do you still have the silver pin with the wolf's head? Did your cousin bring the sealskin he promised? Each question is a thread thrown across the fire. Each answer sets it. Soon there will be a net tight enough to catch sleep. Before it settles, there's the small rite of the place itself, perfunctory and older than the house. The host rises, 2 fingers pressed to the carved post as if to borrow steadiness. He lifts a pinch of salt between finger and thumb, lets it fall into the stew where it dissolves without complaint. For those here, he says. And then, after the smallest beat, and those missing, the oldest child crosses herself in the way her grandmother does. Small and swift, a habit learned sideways from a neighbor, stitched into older ways without fuss. The dogs stand and sit in the same breath, because in this room ceremony smells like food and salt and people breathing in at once. The door pushes once more at its own idea of timing. Someone rises, sets their palm flat to the plank as one might to a horse's shoulder, and persuades it back to stillness. The bar settles into its sockets with a lowered voice clunk, the sound of a shield hung on a wall after a day done. You can feel the hall's breath change, a closing in, a rounding. The cold stays outside. The stories decide to stay in. Coat check. You notice as you stretch your fingers toward the fire again, is just a plank with teeth. No tokens, no numbers, just memory, and the willingness of wool to take a bruise and a burr. You will find your cloak again by the shape it drapes and the bit of crushed ice still clinging to the hem, and yes, the peg bites back with splinters. That's the price of admission, and the only complaint the peg will hear. You lean back against the smooth board that will, later, slide down to turn bench into bed. It holds your shoulder blades like an old friend's hand. Across the hearth, a girl holds her palm above the lamp's flame long enough to show how braver she is than last week. Someone tells her she's smarter when all her fingers work and hands her the spoon. The stew moves around the circle, ladle knocking the pot rim in patient time. The smoke finds its river again and goes where it has always gone. And the longhouse, warm-backed, slow-breathing, stubbornly alive, makes room for you. By the time the stew has settled into that post-supper hush and the horn has made one last lazy circuit, the longhouse performs its favorite magic trick. It turns the day inside out. What was a hall of talk and tools becomes a dormitory of breaths and blankets. No doors to shut, just a practiced choreography that folds the living room into sleep. Start with the benches. They run the length of the hall along both walls, raised a good handspan above the packed clay floor to keep you out of the hearth damp and the winter creeping up from the ground. By day, they are backrests for elbows and stages for stories, the place for mending harness, carding wool, slicing bread, setting cups. By night, they are the bones of the bed. You can see the carpenter's wit in them. Low rails along the front edge hold the world back just enough, and mortised slots, dark with years of hand oil, wait to accept the bedboards. Those boards come down from their hooks like well-behaved shields. 2, sometimes 3, slide into the bench's waiting grooves with a quiet, well-fed click that tells you timber has been speaking to timber for years. A length of wood becomes a ledge. A ledge becomes a platform. A platform becomes a bed wide as kinship. A straw ticket's cloth face patched where the winter mice tried their luck gets lifted, shaken in the smoke, and perhaps encouraged sternly by a stick or two, then lowered into place. If you listen, you can hear the straw sigh. Last summer's field becoming tonight's mattress. In coastal halls, the tick might smell faintly of seaweed dried and beaten soft, springy as if the shore kept a secret for you. Inland, it's rye straw, heather, sometimes birch leaves if gathering went well, small cracklings of summer under your shoulder blades. Soft goods follow like weather systems. Woven wool blankets, undyed cream, soot-dulled gray, a proud stripe of madder or woad-arrive stacked on forearms, edges weighty with tablet-woven bands. Linoleum lingers in them. It's a smell the smoke can't quite bully. A stubborn, clean animal note that says warmth before it says anything else. Over the blankets go skins. Sheepskins turned with care so the curled fleece faces whoever lucks the edge. Calf hides for the drafty end. A fox tossed almost carelessly over somebody's knees, though someone always knows exactly whose fox at island stuffed sacks make their entrance 2 pillows if you use the generous word. Some are filled with down saved like treasure. Most are humbler mixtures of wool scraps, moss, and dried herbs, the sort of pillow that teaches your neck humility but forgives your day. Every chest in the hall has a second job after dark. By day, they are kists for the family's proof of itself, wedding brooches, a comb with its teeth, mostly honest, the iron keys that fit exactly 2 locks in the world. By night, they are nightstands, stools, step-ups for the small and the stiff. And if you are clever pillows wide enough to keep a snoring uncle at strategic distance, their lids wear the smooth sheen of winter heads. Their iron has the mild, old blood glow of metal that has been touched with intention. Everyone knows whose chest is whose. Everyone also knows not to test that knowledge. The map of who sleeps, where was drawn before tonight and will be redrawn, gently, by the night's needs. Closest to the central hearth lies the honor side, the bench nearest the high seat, where the householder and spouse will lie with the youngest child nested into the warm valley between them. The high seat itself sits between carved pillars, a pair of blackened guardians whose tops once rode a ship's keel or once wrote a story so often they count as having done it. And if a guest has earned it, they'll be given the space just under their watch. That is not only warmth, it is promise. Shoulder lengths down will be elders whose knees discuss weather without asking. Next to them, the aunt who knows where every needle in the house sleeps. The farther from the hearth you go, the thinner the air gets, the chillier the drafts, the nearer the door and the dog's cold nose. There lie the farm hands and the men who turn their boots to the door so they can meet trouble with leather, the cousins who arrived at dusk with a sheepish grin and no gifts, the scald, if he's young, and still earning the right to rhyme within reach of the fire. At the far low end, near the byre partition, a thrall with a blanket that is his by use if not by ownership, and 2 boys whispering in a language of elbows until an adult clears a throat and the grammar of silence reasserts itself. Seating order becomes sleeping order without anyone naming it. You do not take the hearth edge unless it takes you. You don't crawl higher on the bench during the night unless a mother or an elder tugs you there. You don't step over the host's feet. You go the long way, even if it means learning a bench's exact width with your hip. It sounds fussy. It isn't. It's the architecture of peace built with wool and wood. Privacy, that delicate bird of southern summers, lives here in winter as a more practical creature. Corners and curtains do the work, walls can't. At the head of one bench, a half-height wooden screen slots into place planks, carved with a simple knot and a row of drilled holes that throw tiny moons onto the smoke. Behind it, an elder coughs and sleeps, and is allowed to be both without so many eyes. Over the bed nearest the high seat, a woolen hanging drops, a loom width of thick cloth, dyed the color of a favorable sea, with a slit that can be opened for a child's hand or a mother's ear. At the far end, a spare sailcloth, patched with care, salt long rinsed out hangs from a pole, making an alcove for a nursing mother and the basket where a baby rides the night like a small, honorable storm. Valuables, an iron knife that remembers a grandfather's hand, a small coffer with silver rings that remember promises, sleep behind such curtains too. Everyone knows they are there. Everyone pretends not to. In the longhouse, privacy is mostly a community project. You look away on purpose, you hum while you pass, you become very interested in the fire's left-hand flame when the right-hand curtain stirs. Before anyone lies down, there's the ritual of bedding itself. Someone beats the blankets with a stick, made soft by years of well-aimed kindness, loosing straw bits and grudges. Someone else takes a flat stone warmed at the hearth and tucks it under the outermost skin at the foot end. A poor man's brazier that can turn the first 5 minutes from argument to possibility. A pair of boys, one smug with height, one hungry to match it, go along the bench, slotting in the last bedboard, eyes level with the groove, hands dirty with competence. A girl pinches a sprig of thyme between finger and thumb, rubs it to wake the oils, and touches the green to the edges of 2 pillows with a seriousness that belongs to people who have seen long winters and know they are won in small acts. She may call it keeping lice polite. Her grandmother, if asked, would call it guest. Right made fragrant, knives and belts find their safe night selves. Belts coil up into sleeping snakes on the chests. Knives slide into worn sheaths, and then under pillows. Blades toward the board reachable, but not courting adventure. Boots get stuffed with dry hay, set by the chest with toes pointing the right way for morning. Mittens hang from pegs like a school of fish. The cat makes a tour of ownership and decides on the lap of the person least likely to move for the next hour. Visitors learn the house's vocabulary quickly. If someone says, "Mind the board," they mean don't catch your heel in the groove as you swing your legs up. If they say, "Give the elder the edge," they mean the wall side, where the draft walks past more politely. If they say, "Let the boy by the fire end," it's an honor disguised as convenience. The child will spend the night drowsing in and out of the adult world's breathing and wake, knowing who snores and who sighs and who says a name in sleep. The high seat holds the invisible grammar of it all. Between its pillars might hang a hammer shape cut in wood, or a small cross carved by a guest and left out of respect, or both, because winter likes its bets hedged. Children touch the pillar as they pass to the bed left, then right, as if the wood remembers fairness. The host sits there last, a palm to the post, looks along the benches the way a shepherd counts on a windy ridge, and then nods. Banking the fire is a sentence and an action. He drags ash over the glowing core with a flat stick, spread just so, leaving a red heart that will breathe until morning. You can feel the house exhale when he does it, as if the walls have been holding a word. The moment before lying down is when the longhouse is most itself full, arranged, ready to forgive. People become shapes, shapes become kin, cloaks become covers, covers become borders, agreed upon by feet and courtesy. The dogs rotate twice, as if stamping their names into the straw, then fold down with a thrum you feel through the boards. A grandfather negotiates with his knees and wins a small treaty. A child nests into the hollow of a mother's belly and makes a sound that is older than houses. Someone coughs twice, always twice. Someone else answers with a spoon of water. The ember ticks as if counting. You will see a small theater in the corners, the kind this house specializes in. A young couple who don't yet share a blanket nonetheless share a look, Nothing to scandalize, everything to carry them through ice breaking in the morning bucket. A returned cousin produces with ceremony a narrow strip of cloth and ties it to the bed, screens drilled row of moons. A favor, a thanks, a promise to bring salt next time. In the alcove, a mother whispers two names, the baby's and the one the curtain is for. The words don't leave the cloth. If you are a guest, your bed is a decision wrapped in a gift. Someone assigns you a place where you will neither freeze nor offend, where you can rise at dawn without putting your heel in a baby or your head under a ladle. You'll be shown how to fold your cloak so that the wet hem faces away and the dry square finds your shoulders. You'll be handed a skin with a cut you will remember because you'll trace it again in the dark if you wake. You'll be told the rule that covers all rules. If you need the night, let the night need you back. Quiet feet, low voice, eyes for the floorboards. Later, when the lamps have been pinched to long wicks and the fire is breathing under ash, you'll learn how sound travels along a bench. You'll learn that the man 2 places down always turns once and then not again, that the elder's breath lifts in a rhythm like a harbor swell, that the dog by your boots dreams in rabbit chase stutters, and that the small person behind the sailcloth sighs like a reed bed on a windless noon. You'll learn that you can roll without waking 4 people if you keep your elbow high and your knee low, and you remember the exact depth of the straw under your hip. And you'll learn the oldest privacy law of the North. When a cough means I'm awake, a second cough means I didn't hear that, and the third cough, if it comes, means the story will keep for the morning. Look up once more before your eyes go to embers. The bedboard's edges make a horizon line along the hall, as if you are lying on a low boat among many low boats, all moored bow to the same red glow. The curtains stir and then still. The carved pillar is a shoulder against the sky. The chest under your hand is a promise under your palm. And the bench, faithful creature, holds not just your bones but the house's shape and the winter's truce. Open plan living, as the Scald would say, because walls are for wimps and for summer. Walk to the far end of the longhouse and the air changes key. The glow from the hearth still reaches you, but it's a lower light here, thicker with a sweetness that's half hayloft, half something earthier. A wattle partition upright stakes woven with withies gone black with smoke marks the shift from people space to buyer space. Beyond it, winter breath rises in little ghosts from broad, patient noses. This is the buyer end of the house. Cattle shoulder to shoulder in their stalls. A couple of ewes blinking that slow, forgiving blink. 2 goats considering the meaning of rope. And a calf testing the theory that everything within reach could be milk. The floor underfoot becomes a road of planks flanked by channels, shallow gutters lined with straw, guiding slurry toward the muck door and, eventually, the midden. It's all very civilized, if you ignore what exactly civilized is made of. The stalls are carpentry in the language of animals. A beam at chest height to lean the winter on. A manger carved out of a split log. Posts rubbed smooth where 1,000 itches found relief. Each place reads like a biography. This cow likes to stand a little crooked. Her board bears the memory of that angle. That ewe has a fondness for tugging the same knot. Look at the glossy spot where rope has been polished by mischief. A goat has already proven the iron ring is not as loyal to the wall as the wall would hope. The cat knows which stall drops the most crumbs of fodder, and has turned that knowledge into a patrol route with a philosopher's dignity. You had thought the longhouse was one room until you reached this end, and realized it is many rooms that decided to hold each other. The byre is not a separate building with a brave corridor to the winter. It is warmth stitched into the day's spine. The animals are not guests. They are radiators that eat and hum, a herd of breathing hearthstones. Put a hand on the broad ribs of the near cow, and you can feel a consistency to her heat, like standing close to bread. The steam of her breath washes your wrist. Her cud rolls behind her cheek with the quiet industry of a mill that never learned how to stop. The heat economy here has rules that make a kind of northern sense. A winter of animals yields a winter of warmth. A winter of warmth yields a spring of milk. Humans are the thermostats opening the little vent at the gable just enough to keep the smoke moving without inviting the night inside, lifting the doorboard 3 finger widths to let a clean strip of air comb the floor, then lowering it again when somebody's toes complain in a language only toes speak. Fresh air is negotiated with frostbite, draft traded in handshakes for breath. Too much open, and the calves cough. Too little, and the lamps falter. and the house learns that smoke can be heavy as sorrow. Everyone here is an engineer, even if no one uses that word. Listen, and you'll learn the night's second soundtrack, the longhouse's low register. There's cud chewing at a tempo that forgives whatever the day forgot to do right. There's the slow shift of weight, hooves knocking the planks with a polite, wooden thud when someone decides a different thought requires a different stance. There is the occasional long, surprised breath of a cow who remembered summer in the middle of winter and exhales the memory all at once. Lambs practice a whisper of a bleat. Goats, having concluded that being quiet is for people who are wrong, aim a short trumpet-like commentary at the darkness just to see if it will answer. It doesn't. But the dog, half asleep in his nest by the doorboard, adds a single bass note that says he's listening anyway. Cats are fiction's idea of themselves in the people end of the hall. Here, along the byre, they are union labor. A gray-backed mouser steps the top of the manger like a tightrope artist who condescends to physics. He pauses, ears flicking to triangulate a rustle beneath the straw, then sinks a paw and performs a quiet miracle on the house's grain reserves. Another cat, black as the smoke space under the ridgepole, sits on a stool entire epochs older than he is and runs the night audit. Rat zero, storage chest seals holding, chicken count steady. 2 dignitaries have chosen the rafters above the byre. Their opinions are important but not binding. Each cat knows which child will feed it, a sliver of fat for services rendered, and each child knows where to hide the sliver from the dog's hopes. The dog is honest in the way coals are honest. He sleeps with his nose aimed at the door, not because anyone told him to, but because that's where the story will come from if the story arrives uninvited. Every now and then, his paws gallop in place, wolves to chase, thieves to argue with, the idea of a fox to scold. If the latch whispers against itself, he rises without dignity, because duty doesn't dress well at 3 a.m. Then he settles back, tucks his nose under his tail, and resumes the argument with the fox, which he always wins. Some nights the house breathes evenly. On others, the weather presses a hand to the thatch, and the byre sings higher. Hooves stamp when a drift pushes against the outer wall. A cow rolls a low rumble in her barrel of a chest as if to persuade the wind to behave. The goats, having read the sagas and taken only the rowdy parts, start a brief discussion of whether the rope is an abstract concept. Someone small, perpetually barefoot, smelling like wool that learned geometry pads down the planks with a lantern shaped like mercy, and settles hay with the flat of a rake. The house believes in this person without looking up. Work lives here in a loop that runs under the lullaby of the hall. Mucking, foddering, milking rotation, as steady as the moon. Before first light, a couple of kids, actual children, not the horned philosophers, take up wooden scrapers crafted from the leftovers of planks and the early training of patience. They push straw, and what straw has learned to hold into the channels that lead to the muck door, fingers red with cold, noses bright with pinched blood, eyes doing that cheerful, resigned thing that says, "This is a story I will tell grandly in 20 years, and grumpily tomorrow." Sometimes they brag about the size of the ice. They broke off the water bucket as if it were a fish. Sometimes they sing, off-key but warmly, because a song is a better handle than a scraper. The muck door opens to the midden, which is the farm's winter engine disguised as untidiness. Steam climbs from the heap like a patient spirit. Chickens mind the edges for mysteries. A fox prints a polite signature in the outer crust and is politely uninvited by a dog who offers terms no fox accepts. The muck goes there to cook down into something spring understands. The channel gets strewn with fresh straw. The planks see the soles of the scraper's boots going one way and the straw going back the other, and they approve the traffic. Foddering is more gentle work and requires hands that remember summers you can taste. A fork of hay goes to each manger, and the mangers tell you which hayfield was generous in August. If your nose can learn the lesson, you will hear the meadows echo in the dry sweetness. If bracken was part of the bedding harvest, its clean tannic note threads through the heavier scent of the cows. A bucket with a scoop of barley glows like a minor hoard in lantern light. The goats would like to be included in that hoard conversation. The goats are not included. The goats file a formal complaint by testing the rope again. Milking, in winter, is a form of meditation that uses hands. A woman settles on a 3-legged stool that understands 1 leg less than a chair is 1 leg more than an argument. Her forehead touches the cow's flank. Her fingers learn warmth again, and the metal pail tells the house what time it is with its first clean ring. The rhythm she falls into is day-saving. A calf grumbles because it is convinced the bowl of the world was made for its particular mouth. The woman laughs under her breath in a language only that calf speaks and tells it it's right about everything except timing. The cat negotiates for a saucer, which appears as if by magic because the cat is also right about everything except humility. Now and then the buyer end is hospital and nursery both. A ewe labors under a low constellation of concerned faces. Someone ties back their sleeves with the same gesture they use for kneading bread. A cord is cut with the same knife that peeled turnips yesterday. In the corner, over the goat pen, an herb frame hangs like a green library. Clusters of thyme dried when the world was warm. A twist of angelica saved for coughs. A bunch of meadowsweet that still lends the air a clean, medicinal sweetness when the lamplight warms it. A woman rubs a tincture into a cracked udder with the same gentleness she would bring to a child's sore heel. The house keeps these correspondences on purpose. There is a reason the benches closest to the buyer end are always claimed, despite the fragrance. Heat moves quiet and loyal from the herds to the humans, while the humans pretend not to notice. Babies sleep with less argument. Elders wake with fewer complaints. The cats choose that borderland for their naps because they know value. A thrall with a thin blanket on a cold night might shift a straw tick 5 finger widths down the bench to catch another cow's worth of subtle weather. And no one will move it back, because survival is a group project here. The buyer also keeps time. You can midnight the hour by which animals stand and lie. Cows lie down together when the dark is old. They rise one by one when the house's red heart has thinned too much, and somebody with sense decides to poke the ash, and then everyone else agrees with that sense. Lambs do their two-legged dance when the cold is about to roll away from the door by one thumb's width. Goats decide dawn is an attitude rather than a moment, and announce it accordingly. The dog stretches, shakes success out of his ears, and conducts a door inspection that includes the polite fiction that the latch required his expertise. Some nights the weather drives, sleet under the doorboard in a glittering line that children draw faces in until a grown-up's boot declares art hours over. On those nights, the buyer smells more sharply of ammonia where urine meets cold. Someone throws fresh straw over the offending clarity, and the straw answers with its own golden language. Other nights, the temperature lifts just enough to let the smell settle into something rounder, and the house's beams release a little of the summer they hid when the sun was generous. And you wonder for a moment whether the longhouse is a lung and you are all breath inside it. Fresh air is a daily referendum. The smoke hole. The Louvre under the ridge, where light writes thin runes through the haze, gets a thumb more open, a thumb less, answered by the draft under the door with a yes or no only the house can hear. Tie it up tight, and the warmth hugs you so closely you forget your nose as an instrument. Open it too far and the embers hiss their disapproval onto the ash. Someone always knows the just right of it, and that person is allowed to be smug as long as the goats are not. If you are a guest with city habits, you might apologize to the cow. You must pass too close to reach the chamber pot, and the cow will accept with a dignity that suggests you were forgiven before you sinned. If you spill 2 kernels of barley on the planks, the cat will invoice you with a look. If you pause in the buyer end because your shoulders relaxed without asking, and you remember the exact sound of your own breath, no one will ask what you are doing. This place is where the house remembers it is made of animals, and that being made of animals is honorable. Children learn courage here without naming it. Their wooden scrapers teach the weight of wet straw. Their hands learn the temperature of milk by guessing less wrong every morning. They hold a lantern steady while a grandmother checks a hoof, and, in that holding, learn that steadiness is a gift people notice even when they don't say so. They step carefully on planks because falling into the channel is a festival no one wants to host. And they tell jokes that make the goats blink, and the cows consider laughter as a concept. They'll go to sleep later, smelling of the work they did, and wake up kinder for it. Sometimes, in the very blue hour, the one that sits between a good dream and the first stir of embers, you will hear a sound from the buyer that reaches past language. A low humming, almost a song, as a cow settles into herself and her stall. A lamb's soft complaint answered by a soft answer. The dog making his small, satisfied woof because the world, for the moment, is exactly where it promised to be. You might think you are the only one awake to hear it. You aren't. The beams are listening. The bedboards are listening. The house stores these sounds and trades them back to you when the day is unfair. Here, Indoors is not an escape from nature. It is an agreement with it. The walls keep the worst of the wind from your bones. The beasts keep the worst of the cold from your breath. You keep the beasts fed and clean and thanked. The house keeps everyone. It's a loop, like the muck, like the milk, like the stories that will be told in the firelight when the chores have put their tools away and hands can hold a horn again. The longhouse doesn't pretend to be two places. It is one place with many hearts. Central heating, Viking edition, 1 cow per 10 square meters. When the chores have been tucked away and the last ladle of stew has traced a brown comet across a wooden bowl, the longhouse changes key. The workday voice boots on planks, iron on oak, softens into the hush that precedes stories. Fire gathers itself into a long, breathing ribbon, and smoke pools beneath the rafters like a low cloud that has decided to stay for the night. Someone nudges the tallow wick. Someone sets another split to the coals, and then thinks better of it, banking the ember instead. On the high seat, the host shifts the cloak at his shoulders and nods toward the scald. The scald is half memory, half musician, and entirely necessary. He doesn't so much arrive as emerge out of the hush, out of the smoke shadows, out of the old habit that houses have for keeping stories in their beams. His harp some nights a 6-string lyre, other nights only a jaw harp. And a voice finds a thin line of sound that threads through the chatter and ties it into a listening. The first notes are a map, the road from now to then. He tastes the room, who is here, who is missing, whose name must be lifted, and begins. He starts with riddles, easy ones at first, to warm the mouths. What walks on 4, then 2, then 3, old as the road, but the children want to wrestle it again, and the elders like watching them win. Then a law verse, those iron couplets learned at the thing, that sing the cost of a broken fence, or how far a man must stand from the water meadow with his axe in berry season. The law is a memory palace. Its lines are steps you can climb until you reach daylight. Reciting them in winter is an act of keeping summer honest. Then he leans into a kenning, and the house smiles because the old shorthand is back. The whale, road for sea. The wound, sea for battle. The mead of poetry for what the scald is pouring into their ears. He names the ancestors in lines that alternate brag and prayer. A grandfather who bent a spear. A grandmother whose brewing made peace out of quarrel. The brown ox that pulled a winter's worth of hunger into spring. Names are stitched into memory, one after another, until the listening becomes a kind of weaving. Small hands on benchboards trace each name like a rune so they won't slip. Between stanzas, the table play starts quiet at first, then louder when the fire loosens shoulders. A nephitaphal board, squared and worn, is slid from a chest that doubles as a nightstand. The pieces, some of bone, some of antler, one suspiciously like a whittled turnip click across the grid. The king tries to slip past the shield wall. The attackers close ranks, the defenders faint, and then a boy sees the double capture one heartbeat too late. A low groan, a higher laugh, and the old man opposite him rubs his beard like a fox who has just found the henhouse door unlaced. Bets are made, not in silver, which winter keeps for iron and funerals, but in hornfuls of ale and honest boasting. Lose and you sing the last verse by yourself. Win and you get the first cut of the rammel. The stakes are modest, the pride immodest, which is the correct ratio in a warm room when snow is shouldering the walls. Stories thicken. A saga episode takes the floor brief tonight. A single chapter stitched clean so no one must go to bed with the hero still halfway across the bog. An uncle claims he saw Aurora once like the cloak of Freya, shaking glitter loose. A cousin counters with a trader's tale of a walrus bigger than a boat. Boasts roll like barrels. And flighting, those nimble combat words, sparks up if two tongues have splinters to pull. Insults are crafted, not thrown, the cleverer the barb, the warmer the laughter. The scald lets it run until it runs thin, then knots it to the saga again so the evening doesn't tip toward quarrel. Genealogy returns, not as a list but as a litany. The host's ring thick as a thumb. Gold with a memory of summer sun rests on the high seat post. A hand is laid to it when an oath is needed. A palm warms it when grief needs company. Names step back further. The man who first split the peat bog. The woman who knew where the fresh spring would come up. There's a rhythm to the recitation that feels like rowing. Each son of, each daughter of, plants a foot in the past and levers the present forward. There is comfort in remembering that the bench you sit on once kept your great-aunt's hip off the draft. Horns pass hand to hand, and with them the social weather. Toasts, many start with the gods, because it pays to flatter the sky. Then the dead are remembered with a warmth that bites a little at the edges. Then living bonds are named and strengthened, that the longhouse's roof might sit snug on the posts. Someone promises a plowshare to a neighbor whose iron has gone thin. Someone else offers a day at the driftwood beaches when the storms have thrown bones of trees ashore. Oaths are sworn, some small and sensible, I will patch the lower barn door before the thaw, and some less wise, I will lift the mast stone with one hand when summer is 3 days old. The skald has a pocketful of cautionary tales about men who promised more than winter allows and brings one out when the boasting swells too high. A brisk little saga about a hero who bet his beard and lost it, and the punchline lands with a roar of pleasure and an unspoken note of mercy. The lyre plucks a pattern under the smoke shadows, steady as a loom. The strings are thick with grease to survive the dryness of the house. The notes are fat, warm lanterns, more than they are stars. A woman hums harmony that she learned on a boat 13 summers ago. A child slides closer to the harp body to feel the ribs of sound in his shoulder. Stories link to songs. Songs braid back into stories. An old law verse is smuggled into a lullaby so the little ones learn to count fines before they can count sheep. Someone recites a verse about frost, the way it takes windows hostage and etches its ugly poems on the inside of the door board. And the house applauds, like a polite wave. It's binge listening before podcasts. One cliffhanger per horn of ale, which is to say, enough to carry you over the midnight ridge without falling asleep on the wrong side of the plot. When the story heat has done its work and the last toast has found its throat, the longhouse turns its face toward the long part of the night. Banking a hearth is an art that looks like tidying up. A shovel of ash is pulled to the lip and lightly sifted over the embers, just enough to smother their pride, not enough to insult their will to live. Peat, if this coast has it, goes on in a flat, friendly slab. Driftwood, if a good storm has been generous, gets leaned where it will think about tomorrow without imagining it can happen now. The log that thought it was invited is escorted gently back to the woodpile with the understanding that patience is a virtue. A stone lid sits over the little pot of fat to keep mice out and flames in. The sacred math, keep flame without burning rafters. Watches tick into place without anyone needing to say the word. The house knows who wakes easy after 2 hours and who wakes angry, who hears foxes thinking about chickens and who sleeps through thunder rolling its barrels down the ridge. The first to rise later will be the one whose knees conduct weather. The one who goes down the first time is the one who talks softer when the wind nags the thatch. The spear keeps its place by the threshold, iron habit against human habit. The axe leans inside the high seat post notch, blade angled away because the house trusts children to be clever but not courteous to their toes. A horn hangs near the door board within a hand's reach of the dog's nose. If he barks in that deep, particular way, a half-asleep arm can find the horn before the brain has decided to be brave. Snow has a language. Those on the watch learn to speak it by listening. There's the hush of new flakes, a whole world learning to walk softer. There's the sizzle of sleet kissing the turf roof, a song the house disapproves but tolerates. There's the deeper groan of loaded timbers, that patient, aching stretch as the rafters shoulder what the sky has chosen to drop. When that one comes, the watcher moves from bench to bench, tapping a post with his knuckle, reading replies like a farmer reads clouds. If the sound is wrong, the long-handled roof rake appears, and 2 sleepers turn into 2 shivering men on the windward wall, pushing white weight down to the forgiving dark. Between rounds, the watcher sits by the hearth's low orange and writes small essays with a poker. Line, dot, ferry boat, notched shield. He lifts the pot lid to persuade one coal to give another the time. If the ember bed is too thin, he rakes from the lower layer, the house's quiet hoard, and pulls up a pulse of red. Ash is drawn over again like a good blanket. Big fire is for feasts. Little fire is for night. He makes a door tour. The board is seated well in its slots. The latch answers with its wooden yes. The leather thong across the bar is still tight. He lifts the board with 2 fingers for a breath of air, and the dog sneezes because night is rich with news. Stars burn beyond the smoke hole like nails in the roof of the world. Some nights the aurora shows her skirts. and the smoke hole turns into a well you could tumble into with your eyes. Ice needles the gaps around the pegs in the wall and draws a glittering lace across the rim of the water bucket. Nothing a palm won't break. Everything a palm will remember. He steps to the byre end. A lamp the size of a cupped hand makes a dome of yellow on a cow's flank. The flank rises and falls. An ocean. Lambs slept with their noses on each other's backs, and now uncurl their question marks, decide the answer is no, and fold themselves up again. The goats perform a silent experiment on a knot, and are surprised to discover the rope can still be right when they are wrong. The dog walks with him and pretends not to. The cat does not walk with him and pretends she does. He listens to the house's breath and decides the house is winning. Sometimes it's wind you must argue with. Sometimes it's neighbors. The longhouse is clan before it is lumber. If trouble slips between the fence posts, strangers, a drunk without a door, a fire where fire shouldn't be, the alarm is quick and specific. A horn answers a bark. A hand drums a shield, so the sound carries like urgency does. Names are shouted in an order older than the doorboard. Porches are built fast and ugly and servile. Twisted birch bark tucked into a split. A rag dipped in fat because this is the hour for function, not ceremony. Men run with axes because the cold teaches everyone to be brief. And then the doorboard lifts on a different sort of visitor. The wind is a rumor of wolves, but the night itself brings only stars and the distant growl of ice breaking itself on the shore. The watcher sits. He counts firewood the way some men count sheep, and then, realizing he believes the number, ties on his boots and goes to split more. Insomnia cure. Count firewood, then get up and split more. He makes a circuit of the sleeping. A hand to a child's brow to confirm the fever is softened. A finger to the fat pot to confirm the lid still seals. A glance into the shadow where the spare cloaks hang to confirm they haven't become men in his imagination. He moves like someone trying not to wake a lake. Now and then the old timber under the floor speaks in its slow whale voice. He tells himself it is the timber drying. If it creaks twice in the same place, well, that's what tales are for, and morning. Before he wakes the second watch, he returns to the ember bed and lifts a small coal with the poker, sets it in the little traveling lamp, coaxes it with a breath. He greases the wick with a pinch of tallow and watches the lamp shift from red to orange to the shy, busy yellow that says, "I am small, but I am a city." He passes it to the next watcher, who receives it like a shield, like a child, like the next chapter. Night in the North is a geography with its own folk. Most of them you can name, and naming is half the keeping. There are the comfortable house spirits, the ones you don't own, and wouldn't if you could. There are the ones that keep to the mound and sometimes forget why they should. There are the winds themselves, which accept gifts better than they accept argument. Between them all, the longhouse threads a path, every beam a sentence in a story about staying. Children are not told about Draugr to scare them. They are told so the children will understand the shape of a shadow is sometimes only shadow, and sometimes not. The Draugr restless dead who didn't stay respectfully dead wears the shape of a man, but not his limits. He is heavy, swollen with a kind of strength that doesn't have to ask the living for permission. He guards what he thinks is his, which is often a mound, and sometimes a grudge. The stories say he presses on the chest of sleepers and steals their breath for the fun of it, that he walks like creaking ice, that he hates the sound of iron and laughter. Those stories are not for the very small ears. They are for the ears who earn a knife. The house does small, practical magic because it likes sleeping more than it likes drama. An iron knife under a pillow is not only a knife under a pillow. Iron offends whatever has forgotten how to be kind. A rune staff is scratched onto the bedboard. Simple lines, a bind of protection. Not because the people here mistake wood for a god, but because wood listens when you remind it to stand its ground. The door lintel wears a few notches that may be carpentry, and maybe a charm. Either way, the lintel enjoys the attention. A tiny Thor's hammer, nothing ostentatious, just a comfort weight of bronze, hangs where a hand can find it in the morning and feel stronger for it all day. The Landvanderland spirits get a little bread at the threshold and a good word when the first furrow is cut, not out of superstition but out of courtesy. The sea whites by the rock sometimes receive a clamshell of ale tipped where the foam can taste it. Nobody carves dragon heads for the prow when sailing into certain fjords, because someone once did and the land spirits objected with a storm. Whether you call it law or lore doesn't matter. The point is that courtesy is safer than correctness in a world big enough to have an opinion about you. Dreams do traffic at night, like sleds on a hard road. Some are just the mind looking for a warm corner. Others walk in with purpose and sit down on your chest until you understand. An elder with a braid the color of rope has a way with these. In the morning, she will sip broth and listen to a dream as if it were a neighbor at the door. If you dreamed of a fish swimming through a fence, she will ask what you lost yesterday and let you find your own answer. If ravens enter the telling, the room goes quieter because some birds are just birds and some carry a one-eyed god's errands. 2 ravens circling and returning. Mind yourself. 1 raven looking at you twice. Mind the path by the bog. If you dream of a bear, make more soup and invite the neighbor who hasn't visited since harvest. Children are initiated in the sensible mysteries. They learn to spit in their palms and say a quick nonsense rhyme before lifting a heavy thing, because bravado needs a ritual or it spills. They learn to braid a bit of red wool into a lock of hair on the dark nights because red is a color the cold can see and respect. They place 3 crumbs on the hearthstone after a feast and say, "For whoever's hungry under our floor," which covers gods, mice, and whatever you cannot name without waking. No one calls these prayers. They are called "How We Do," which is the most honest name. Draugr, when told, are not left to end the tale. The skald always puts an iron nail through the story, or a hero with a good shovel and better friends. Fire is named twice, once as warmth, once as boundary. If the mound must be opened in a saga, it is opened at noon in a wind, with neighbors, and the dead is met with a song as well as a spear. Children take from this neither terror nor bravado, but proportion. Most nights, the house is a house. Some nights, the house shares its breath with older things, and on those nights, good manners are armor. The floor creaks because timber dries and swells like a living thing. If it creaks once, it is the timber. If it creaks twice, absolutely a ghost. This is said with a smile that has learned not to stare too long into corners. Older ears will sometimes sit a while with the creak anyway, not because they believe in creaks that are men, but because sitting with maybe is good practice for living. Omens are read because the world writes, and it would be rude not to read. A sudden silence at the byre door might mean a fox thinking about making a bad decision. The way smoke takes a turn at the ridgepole may mean weather from the north by the hour. A pot that cracks without insult might want you to boil the barley slower and talk to your sister. The house gathers these into its quiet, practical wisdom and lets the skald put the better ones into verse, which is how a people keep a library without shelves. Charms take the shape of what will be touched. A little twig cross of rowan tied with sheep's wool hangs where the baby sleeps, not because rowan is stronger than death, but because effort matters to luck. A small leather pouch stitched shut holds a sliver of whalebone and 3 barley grains. When asked, the owner shrugs and says, "It's for walking," which could mean ankles, weather, or life. A runic staveno grand sigil, just an honest bind rune, gets cut into the underside of a bedboard when someone has been sick too long and courage needs a place to sit. Men and women touch these things the way you touch your own wrist when you count your pulse, to feel that something continues. And there is the other kind of spirit, the ones you can name without fear. The spirit of the herd when the first calf stands like a little folded chair suddenly remembering its job. The spirit of the sea when driftwood piles up like blessings the day after a gale. The house warmth itself, a personality you could speak to if you were alone and tired enough, and perhaps you have. These are not gods. They are familiar grammar. They make speaking to the dark easier. So, the longhouse sleeps, mostly. A timber sighs, because it is a body. The dog knocks his tail once against the doorboard to let the night know someone is home. A child turns over, taking the corner of a blanket and giving back a handful of hair. Outside, something steps in snow that is not a man and not a story, just a deer whose breath curls like riding in cold air. Inside, a floor creaks because timber dries. If it creaks twice, it is absolutely a ghost. Winter in the longhouse isn't something you survive by stubbornness alone. It's 1,000 small decisions stacked like kindling. Each one catches, each one makes the next easier to light. You feel it first in how people dress, not as fashion but as argument with the cold. Layer logic rules the room. Closest to skin is linen, even in the north, even when looms groan and flax stalks chew your fingers raw in summer. Linen breathes, linen wicks. Linen keeps the day from sticking to you. Over that, wool. Honest, work-ready sweaters of it. Knee-length tunics felted just enough to laugh at wind. Leg wraps wound like careful promises. When the wind whistles through the doorboard, the wool whistles back. Then the outside layer. Skin with the memory of animals still in it. Seal for those who live where waves gnash. Reindeer or cow where pasture drops its shoulder against the hills. A cloak that was a calf once is a decent argument against sleet. You watch someone dress, and it's a lesson in cause and effect. Linen to take sweat. Wool to trap breath. Hide to turn teeth. The kids try to escape without caps and are herded back by a chorus of mothers and a single raised eyebrow from an elder. Caps in bed, too. Anyone who has slept under a cold roof knows the warmth leaks out of your scalp like gossip if you give it the chance. No one here gives it the chance. Boots are small houses. Felted wool boots with straw stuffed between sock and boot turn a raw board floor into something your bones can believe in. The straw isn't just padding. It's a habit of swapping out the damp before it starts lying to your toes. Straw and hair, horse, goat, sheep live in baskets by the bench. You insert a handful like a quiet deal with tomorrow. I'll keep walking if you keep my feet. The soles are rawhide. The laces are clever. The rule is simple. Dry boots near the fire, never on it. Melted boots are funnier to talk about than to wear. Heat hacks turn into evening rituals. There's a flat stone the size of a newborn's back that lives beside the hearth, not in the fire, beside it. Before bed, someone wraps it in a scrap of cloth and tucks it at the foot of a sleeping bench. The stone doesn't boast. It just turns a cold foot into a negotiable problem. A pot of ale idles at the fire's shoulder. It's warm in the way that tells your marrow you've been remembered. Someone pinches in herbs yarrow if there's a cough, juniper if the room feels heavy, a suspicion of honey if a child has been brave all day and needs a kind ending. Broth does more work than sermons. Bone broth, thick enough to leave a trail, is poured into bowls you can hold with both hands like a prayer. The broth is instruction as much as comfort. Marrow, sinew, boiled patience. A winter rule says if the broth jiggles like a timid dog in the morning, you did it right last night. They will tell you what's in it, but you already know. Those winter soups taste like every decision the farm made in autumn. A bit of sour, a bit of smoke. Answers from the bones of animals whose heat you're borrowing one more time. The architecture gets a vote and usually wins. Turf walls do not look like architectural theory. They look like the earth hugging you back. Layer on layer, sod turned and stacked with the grass side out, seams staggered like bricks, frozen together by the marriage of weather and will. Between turf and timber, wind loses heart. The longhouse skeleton is ship logic turned upright. Curved beams like ribs, a keel of a ridgepole that runs the length of the world, pegged joints that flex instead of sulk. That low roof holds warmth like a cupped hand. It also collects smoke, which sounds like a problem until you remember summer mosquitoes. Smoke is policy. It lifts, it drifts, it smudges the thatch with a dark blessing. And in return, the midges consider other careers. Windows are not panes. They are openings with manners. Shutters bite against leather hinges. Lattices carry scraped bladder membranes where daring and wealth overlap. Light arrives like a hush and leaves the same way. Drafts are edited rather than eliminated. A ribbon of cold air is handy for a sleeping fire and honest lungs. Where the smoke hole squints, there are adjustable eyelids of plank and turf. They blink to match the weather's mood. You learn by the hour how to set them. Too open, and the house sighs itself chilly. Too closed, and your eyes learn a vocabulary of sting you didn't know they needed. Every surface is a drying rack if you learn how to ask it. Moisture management is the quiet science of winter. Mittens on a peg 3 arm lengths from the flame will be wearable by morning. Mittens hung where flame licks will be a story by morning. Steam is the enemy of tomorrow's courage. The thing that hides in socks and waits 2 hours into the sled track to tell you it was never truly gone. So the house breathes. Cloaks get draped over poles where smoke can comb them without chewing. Boots get upended so steam can flee rather than plot. Snow is beaten from hems with cheerful violence at the threshold. Someone walks the line of boots and stuffs fresh straw where yesterday's straw forgot its job. Beds aren't beds until they're warmed with bodies and tricks. A fur tossed over straw turns rustle into hush. Two children under one heavy pelt make a small kingdom. People coil like commas, head to the warm at the middle, feet to the hot stone at the end. The outermost sleeper wears the biggest hat. Not because of modesty, but because the longhouse understands thermodynamics at the level of gossip. Elbows keep distance honest. Breath keeps tempers soft. Hands and faces get their own methods. A basin of water lives near the fire, not so near that it picks up ash, close enough that it remembers liquid. A cloth warmed there takes the sting out of mornings. Grease, not just for lamps. Seal oil rubbed into chapped hands. Goose fat spread with a finger on the knuckles. Lanolin that lives in wool whether it wants to or not. Short nails, not for fashion, but because long ones carry winter under them. The kitchen corner is an engineering department. Lids keep warmth in and argument out. A trivet is a little hero that reports to the pot and the coals with equal loyalty. Hooks suspend iron at different heights because simmer is a letter, and boil is a shout, and stew reads best as a whisper. A flat griddle leans by the hearth for moments when someone wants bread that remembers summer. Pancakes made with yesterday's milk and stubbornness. The sound they make when flipped is proof that small triumphs are legal in February. Clothing repairs happen in concentric rings around the fire. The closer you sit, the stiffer the felted wool in your lap. The farther you sit, the more you can see to thread a bone needle. Patches come from the bowl of cuttings by the chest. They arrive like favors and go away as gratitude. Sinew thread, linen thread, wool yarn, all with a job. If a hole is honest about the day that made it, the patch is honest about the hand that mended it. No one is ashamed of stitches. The North was held together with them. People share warmth the way they share news. A place by the hearth passes from elder to child because circulation is a family project. If you come in blue-lipped from a night round, someone who is not your kin will shoulder you into the warmest place and put a mug in your glove-stiff hand. They might not say, "I love you" with words. They will say it with steam and space, and with a dry joke. Your eyebrows thawing off in gusts gets a laugh and a fingertip flick to brush them back into order. Tools get their own frost fixes. An axe warmed by the hearth is an axe that bites straight. An axe set too close is a handle that dries into a split. Skates made from cow bone lean against a post to remind children that winter is not only hardship. A sled runner is rubbed with fat until it shines like the answer to a riddle. The house's ladder used for roof, rafters, hayloft is wood on wood, never iron on frost, because some conversations should be quiet. Even the dog knows the rules. He beds down where the door leaks least and wakes where boot steam collects most. At dusk, he naps on a pile of mittens, as if assigned to guard the courage of tomorrow. At dawn, he stands in the exact place that makes getting out the door impossible until someone says his name exactly right. The cat edits moisture by sleeping on damp hats. It is not a favor, but the hats are grateful. The last trick is collective. Timing. You do not open the doorboard wide, and suddenly, unless braver than sense. Crack, check, breathe, then lift. You do not toss wet wood onto a pleading fire. You feed it the dry heart of logs you stacked 6 weathers ago, because past you did present you a kindness, and present you returns the favor by not being stupid. Someone shifts the shutter just before sleep so the smoke hole can think without sulking. Someone's job unassigned, understood, is to glance up at the rafters and listen for the gossip of drips. The house manages itself by being managed 1,000 times a night. Comfort isn't the right word. Competence that feels like comfort is closer. The room looks the same as it did at dusk benches, beams, a red vein where the hearth breathes. But now it holds a dozen microclimates like a well-tended field. Warm corners for infants, cool edges for men who run hot, a clear lane for the woman who will rise to feed the baby without waking the stew. Everyone knows where these are without thinking. It's choreography disguised as furniture. And when someone mutters "hig," they mean something older. The trust that the heat you saved will be there when you reach for it. Candles sigh. Wool sighs. People sigh. Winter leans in to listen and, finding the house fully briefed on its tricks, decides to argue somewhere else for a while. Morning in the longhouse doesn't arrive like a trumpet blast. It sidles in on felted feet. The watchman's last check becomes the first chore as someone who knows the heart's moods, leans into the ash bed and coaxes yesterday's heart to remember its job. A poker sketches circles. The rake lifts the gray duvet off red whispers, and a breath through a reed or a cupped hand turns whispers into words. Coals wake. Kindling listens. Flame answers. The kettle is a reflex hook, swung out, iron-bellied with yesterday's water, hung where heat is promise but not threat. The first sound of the day is not a rooster. It is water thinking about itself. Bars come off the door in the order the house learned last winter. Top first so drifted snow doesn't shoulder you. Bottom last so cold doesn't fall in like an uninvited cousin. The doorboard tips forward, the world's breath rushes in, and every nose in the room performs a quick inventory. Frost sharp, wind from the north, sky pale, no new snow sneaking under the sill overnight. Dogs slide into the seam between night and day and sniff like professionals. One sneezes, declares the perimeter acceptable, and posts himself on the threshold anyway. Animals go first, always. Cloaks over shoulders, boots over straw, a lantern's small sun swinging low. The byre door groans and exhales a weather of its own, sweet, steamy, and honest about what bodies do when they've been eating and breathing all night. Someone breaks skim ice in the trough with a stick that knows this job intimately. Hay forks whisper from the loft. Flakes shaken loose like promises. Cows rise with their soft thunder. Noses already telling buckets where to be. Goats pronounce opinions. Sheep blink into the lamplight and decide to be led, because habit is the shepherd that never sleeps. Cats ghost along beams and posts, punching a time card with their tails. A child, hair fluffed by sleep and smoke, shoulders a wooden scraper and sets to the business of mucking as if the world began with it. Back inside, the house edits itself for the day. The banked fire becomes a working fire. The damp log waiting all night on the hearth's far stone moves to the flame and drops a sigh older than language. The first cups are warm ale small beer with a whisper of yesterday's herbs, because winter mornings don't care how you feel about temperance. A flat stone cleared for slicing wears its usual morning jewels. Yesterday's bread, today's butter, a heel of cheese that tastes like patience, and a garden you can't see anymore. Someone softens a slice in the steam off the kettle. Someone else sees it with a knife that wakes up dull. And so the whetstone begins its own song. Draw, draw. Lift steel finding itself in small sparks you can hear more than see. Breakfast describes an argument between appetite and chores. Bread goes from hand to mouth. Butter maps the crackle of last night's crust. A swallow of warm ale relocates courage. If there's a pot still friendly from the night before, a ladle finds the good parts at the bottom. A marble of fat. A strip of root softened into sweetness. A bone that is given up. Porridge happens without anyone deciding. Barley or oats or rye, whatever the bins can spare, coaxed into thick with a wooden spoon that knows the exact center of the pot by memory. A pinch of salt, if the stores forgive it. A dollop of yesterday's skyr if the dairy smiled. Knives are honed as mouths chew. The whetstone travels a clockwise path around the hearth benches, pausing where a hand is empty. Seeks, carving blade, small kitchen knife. It doesn't matter. Steel is a community project. Sharpening is talk in another dialect. That notch? Birch knot. This bend? The sled runner bit my pride. Hold it flatter. Let the stone do work. Sparks are compliments you can't spend, but they spend you into competence just the same. And then the task web opens like a net. Men to the woodlot? Often, yes, but winter minds the verb more than the gender. Whoever's shoulders are willing and whose hands are freshest, take the axes out to the stand of birch that owes you 3 trees and a promise. They go in pairs because a tree falls how it pleases and a sled pulls better with jokes. Splitting happens where the snow packs firm, wedges kiss the grain, and the day produces the sound that makes every longhouse smile inside. The clean crack of a log admitting it's now 4. The sled sighs. The dog approves. The path back to the door is an equation solved with rhythm. Women to dairy and loom? Often, yes, but the churn doesn't ask. Milk catches the warmth of the house in wooden pails as foam. A froth that says animals did their morning right. Cream is skimmed with the edge of a ladle trained in patience. Butter happens where elbows are honest, and the churn knows a beat you can breathe to. Whey finds a pot for soup. Curds find a press. The warp-weighted loom has its own dawn finally. Curtains pulled, heddles checked, stones dangling like quiet moons. A hand slick with lanolin brushing threads until they behave. The shuttle begins the day's shuttle diplomacy between warp and weft, and cloth grows like a polite drift against the bottom beam. A toddler toddles under the loom. The house's cat establishes a policy against it. The toddler negotiates early, and the loom wins because gravity is an ally. Children to the grindstone and errand? Yes, and to anything that needs a small back and a sincere willingness. A handcorn sings in the corner, top stone turned with a stick, bottom stone holding the line, grain pouring down like a short snowfall. The rhythm is a lesson disguised as labor. Swap hands when they burn. Swap kids when they don't admit they're tired. A sack of barley to the neighbor? Strap it high. Say the greeting right. Don't dawdle by the drift where the wind makes small miracles out of trash. Bring back the iron hook we lent them. No, not that iron hook. The other one that looks exactly the same, but is not at all the same. You'll know it, by the way. It bites your glove. Everyone shovels. That is the only fair rule winter respects. Paths are not for aesthetics. Paths are for the arithmetic of time. Door to buyer, door to woodpile, door to well, door to neighbor's door in case today is the day we need each other fast. Roofs get raked so weight doesn't learn how to be gravity's lawyer. The smoke hole's shoulders are knocked clear. The drift along the north wall is scolded back to reasonable. You throw snow in a way that teaches it where to be helpful. Banked along the base of walls to keep drafts nervous. Not piled against doors that might need to be a sentence later today. Daylight economy is a sprint between two small suns. The light is a coin. Spend it on what breaks you if you don't. Repairs first, improvement if fortune smiles. Harness leather is warmed and oiled so it doesn't crack like a bad joke 2 hours from home. Sled runner reshod where iron met a rock the hard way. An axe haft sanded smooth where a splinter introduced itself rudely yesterday. A fishing net mended because spring will be rude in its own way if you let winter make you lazy. Pine tar warmed and brushed on wood that remembers boats and wants to again. Nails forged 2 by 2 while the light is enough to trust the color of iron. A ski shaved on the underside, fat rubbed in, a finial carved on a whim that will make a child grin later grins, are also fuel. Tools come and go in a choreography only the house knows. The awl returns to its peg. The whetstone returns to the shelf. The drop spindle winds a fresh cop of yarn and parks in a basket that remembers summer sheep. The carders trade hands, turning clouds into order. A bone needle finds the rip in a sleeve and teaches it to be a seam. A kettle yields to a cauldron, then returns to claim warmth again. The ladle is never where you think it is, and always where the oldest person reaches without looking. Weather is a co-worker with seniority. If the wind sings in the thatch like a flute, you stack wood inside the threshold because the world intends mischief. If the blue hour arrives early and shoulders your afternoon like a bully, you admit defeat and turn your sprint into a tidy retreat. Tools wiped dry, edges oiled. Projects nested like dolls, so tomorrow will feel easy even if it won't be. The doorboard drops at dusk with the same thud as last night. The house inhales you, counts noses, and assigns evening the tasks that light surrendered. Some chores are sentences you recite without thinking because they kept your grandparents alive. Sprinkle sand and ash where boots slip. Hang mittens 2 arm lengths from flame, not 1. Turn the boots upside down so steam leaves instead of plotting ambush. Put the axe where the child can't find it, but the night watch can. Sweep the threshold so the first person in from the dark doesn't track in a story you don't have time to clean. Hang tomorrow's cloaks high where cats can sleep on them and claim credit for warmth. By the time the light is committed to the day, breakfast has become fuel and a memory. Someone has already asked for a second slice and been told after the sled is loaded. Someone else has tried to bargain with chores and been out-bargained by a grandmother who knows every trick and invented several. The longhouse hums, not loud, not quiet, the noise of competence. It smells like steam and wool and butter and old smoke, and an argument with winter you are absolutely winning, one small task at a time. And when someone stretches, scratches, and stokes the fire, another voice, maybe yours, answers the room with the only morning mantra anyone here needs. Pretend you slept great. The house laughs without making a sound, and the day gets on with it. If you want a single sentence to explain why a longhouse works, try this. Resilience is communal. Heat, labor, story, and watch are shared or not at all. One person can keep a spark alive. Many can keep a winter at bay. You hear it in the way chores braid. Someone banks the coals. Someone splits the next log. Someone mends the mittens that will fetch that log tomorrow. And an elder tells a tale that keeps the youngest from opening the door when the wind calls their name. Every act nests inside another, like boxes carved from the same block. When the doorboard drops, the world narrows to the room, and the room expands to include everyone in it. Design follows climate because climate will not follow your preferences. The longhouse answers with a single room that refuses to be merely one thing. It has a kitchen and courtroom, nursery and armory, stable and chapel, stage and sick room. The benches turn to bunks by night. The byre becomes a boiler. The rafters hang meat, memory, and tomorrow's courage to dry. The hearth, neither glamorous nor decorative, keeps the calendar. Porridge season, broth season, render the fat season. The joyful week, the first green shoots show up in the pot, and everyone pretends to like nettle soup more than they do. It's a clock you can eat by. The smoke hole does double duty as philosophy. Warmth rises, so keep the roof low and your pride lower. Memory is a survival tool here, sharpened on both edges. The sagas are not only entertainment, they're boundary markers. Do not cross the mountain in thaw. Trade fairly, unless you want to buy an enemy. Do not promise what winter has not promised you. The stories paint the weather with a personality you can negotiate with, and warn you when not to try. Names are not recited for vanity. They are a trail of breadcrumbs through storms you haven't met yet. Genealogy maps who shelters, whom when the sled breaks, whose ox you can borrow without turning a favor into a feud, who owes your grandmother for the time she midwifed twins by lamplight with a broken wrist and a better curse. Every punchline carries a rule. Every boast is an invoice. Every ghost warns you of thin ice, even when the winter looks smooth and innocent. And the watch, that quiet choreography of listening bodies, teaches a subtler lesson. Vigilance is a group rhythm. One person hears the wind change, another smells the snow. The dog registers a silence where the owl should be. Someone, half asleep, remembers a creek that doesn't belong to timber. No one claims the whole solution. Together, they do not miss it. That's the northern thesis. Modest parts, excellent sums. Modern echoes aren't hard to find if you tilt your head. Open plan rooms with sofas that become beds, benches that hide blankets, and a kitchen that's the true center of the house. That's longhouse logic in a cardigan. Winter kitchens that gather the clan around stew and a low lamp? Check. The mudroom with hooks for gear, a boot tray that saves your floors, and a bucket that solves problems faster than philosophy? Longhouse again. Even co-working, the fancy word for doing your separate tasks together, has old smoke on it. One person cards wool, while another balances the household ledger, and a third slices wood thin enough to start tomorrow's fire. The glamour may be new. The bones are old. And the art of cozy, whatever you call it in your language, is not a candle catalog, it's earned. It smells faintly of work done earlier and work you'll do after the tea. It is a blanket washed with the last hot water before the pipe froze. It is bread that rose in a bowl tucked near the oven because the house leaned its heat into your ambition. It is laughter that knows a draft is sneaking under the sill and stands back to block it. Cozy isn't purchased, it's rehearsed. You feel it most when the wind decides to test you and find you already in formation. Strip the lesson further. Own less, tell more. A longhouse cannot store infinite things, but it can store infinite stories. The stories ensure you use the right things at the right time. Fix them before they break loudly, and lend them to the person who will return them on time and sharpen them. Minimalism here isn't aesthetic, it's aerodynamics for weather. Pride gets shaved off like a curl from a fresh board. Excess gets bartered. Clutter becomes kindling. Generosity turns a spare into a safety net. And if you need a final northern rule, it's this. Practice warmth. Not just heat, warmth. Warmth is how you hand someone a cup with both hands, how you knock before you lift the latch, how you hang mittens so the shortest person can reach them. Warmth is the extra slice you cut off for later, and then pretend someone else dropped into your bowl by accident. Warmth is the story that keeps a child from walking into a storm because they know the drogger prefers braggers. Warmth is the watch that lets the others sleep. Warmth is the laugh that admits the stew is too salty and the night too long and serves seconds anyway. Lay a single winter night on the table, and you'll see the Viking toolkit spread out in plain sight. Courage without spectacle. Craft that looks like a chair leg but saves a back. Kin as a verb, something you do, not just something you are. And a reverence for embers and stories, because both go out if you stop tending. The longhouse is not romance. It is competence wrapped in smoke. Yet it is tender, too, in the way a blanket is tender, woven from small strands that only become strong together. Bridge that smokes now. We have traded smoke holes for skylights, bedboards for duvets, tallow for LEDs, sled tracks for snowplows. Our thermostats argue with the weather, so our breath doesn't have to. But when evening nudges us inward, where do we go? To a warm square of light. The orbit stoves, screens, candles, cousins, dogs. We binge sagas in 16 episodes instead of 16 winter nights. But the itch we scratch is the same. Who are we? To each other. When the wind gets loud, we still sharpen tools while the soup simmers budget spreadsheets, lunchboxes, to-do lists, resumes, hope. We still measure wealth in whose number do I call at 2 a.m. and who knows where the flashlight lives? So let the longhouse hand you a benediction it once learned from weather. Keep what keeps you. Keep the habit of sharing heat. Keep the ritual of checking doors. Keep the humor that makes chores feel like succession rather than sentences. Keep the story that reminds you which promises winter never made, and the ones you must make anyway. Keep the craft that turns scraps into solutions. And keep a place, however small, where the room turns into many rooms when the lamps are low and the names start to sound like a blessing. May your fire keep, your roof hold, and your ale be just warm enough. If the wind groans, let it. The longhouse has heard worse. Next time your apartment smells like dinner and your neighbor's laughter leaks through the wall, congrats! You're doing winter the Viking way.